It's the 84th Annual Academy Awards, and the Oscars were in recovery mode once again. Not because people disliked the movie that won Best Picture, not because of any scandal, but because hosts James Franco and Anne Hathaway were so bad at their job, the show ended up being the most uninteresting slog to watch in many years. And we're talking about a presentation where 75% of the show is famous people making speeches and thanking people most audience viewers don't know. In all fairness, the Academy made a gamble to court younger viewers. They just lost that gamble. And when one loses big, the next time around it's time to play it safe. So the Academy brought back host Billy Crystal to right the ship, in what would be his 8th time hosting the show. Yeah, it wasn't exactly a daring choice, but after last year, the Oscars needed some stability. Ironically, while the show would receive some host stability, the Best Animated Feature award would be shaken up in a very significant way. Aside from the fact that there would be 5 nominations instead of 3, some major players would be left out of the race this time around, with snubs that would be more noteworthy than some of the nominees. The first snub was The Adventures of Tintin, directed by the one and only Steven Spielberg. While Spielberg was no stranger to producing animated features, this was the first time he had sat in the director's chair for one. The Adventures of Tintin was a massive undertaking, with the goal being to create a trilogy of films, with Spielberg directing the first movie with producer Peter Jackson, the Academy Award-winning director of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Jackson would then direct the second installment, with a third film being directed by both men. Things started off strong with a good, though not great, box office, favorable reviews, and even a Golden Globe win for Best Animated Feature. By all accounts, The Adventures of Tintin was a shoo-in for a nomination. The problem was the movie was made with motion capture technology, and the animating voting block made it very clear that they considered motion capture to be a form of tracing. They already snubbed Robert Zemeckis 3 times for this, and the fact that they said no to Spielberg showed that they were pretty darn serious about the tech not being welcome in the Best Animated Feature category. Having won several predecessor awards, the fact that The Adventures of Tintin didn't get nominated was a sign that this was going to be an unpredictable year. One nomination that would have been a really cool one would have been Alois Nebel, which was a neo-noir drama about a man suffering from PTSD from his involvement in World War II. Though little seen by many, those who saw the movie praised the film as being revolutionary, and the Czech Republic even selected it as the film to represent their country in the Best Foreign Language Film category. While it wouldn't be shortlisted there, it was shortlisted for Best Animated Feature, so it was obviously ultimately not nominated. Aardman Animation also struck out with their collaboration with Sony Animation, Arthur Christmas, which had a soft box office but was hailed by many to be a new holiday classic. While the movie didn't look like the typical Aardman feature film, it had the heart of an Aardman production, and its omission was considered to be a huge shock to the industry, considering the Academy had showered Aardman films with Oscars and nominations in the past. The big omission was Cars 2, though, which not only came from reigning champion Pixar, but previous Academy Award winner John Lasseter. While the first movie received 2 Oscar nominations, Cars 2 was completely shut out, and this would actually mark the first time a Pixar film would be released to poor audience and critical reception, with a lukewarm box office. The decision to focus the story on sidekick to Mater was considered extremely harmful to the story. The bright spot was that Disney made a ton of money on toy sales, though that isn't a metric the Academy is too concerned with. Romeo and Juliet also failed to get a nomination, despite being the animation debut of Elton John's Rocket Pictures. The movie was produced by John and directed by Kelly Ashbury, featuring much of John's classic music, and it was a surprise hit at the box office due to its unusually low budget for an animated film. Yet reviews were average and most agreed that the movie was fine, but unmemorable. Despite winning a few years ago, George Miller couldn't get a second Oscar nomination for Happy Feet 2, which featured half of the original voice cast from the first film and was largely panned as being an especially unnecessary sequel. The biggest thing the movie had going for it was the excellent music, which meant that a song nomination could have been in the cards, but this was a weird year where only 2 songs were nominated in the Best Song category, forcing the Academy to rethink how the nomination process worked there. And if you'd like to see a video on that, give this one a like and ask for it in the comments below. While an Oscar nomination was unlikely, Disney struck out with Mars Needs Moms, another motion capture film that animators at the Academy hated. Unlike other motion capture films they passed over though, Mars Needs Moms was received extremely poorly, and flopped so badly it resulted in Disney's shuttering production studio Image Movers, and this likely resulted in bringing the momentum of the motion capture industry for animation to a screeching halt, and remains one of the biggest money losers for Disney alongside John Carter. A movie that did receive a song nomination was Rio for the song Born in Brazil. Despite this catchy tune getting a Best Song nomination, it did not result in the movie getting into Best Animated Feature. Disney struck out twice with Winnie the Pooh, their, to date, most recent 2D animated film. Although the movie got good reviews and the soundtrack was noted for being a highlight, the movie may have skewed too young for Oscar voters, and it did poorly at the box office because some suit at Disney decided it would be a good idea to release it on the same day as the final Harry Potter movie. Yes, this is a thing that happened, and if you want to hear the director's thoughts on that decision, you can check out my interview with him at the link above. But if powerhouses like Disney, Pixar, Aardman, and Steven Spielberg were sitting out the race, who did get in? The first nomination was A Cat in Paris, directed by Jean-Luc Felicioli and Elaine Ganol. A Cat in Paris was a traditionally animated film from France about a mute girl who witnesses a crime she wasn't supposed to, and the noble thief who tries to protect her with his cat. Though little seen, it left a huge impression on the animating voting bloc, who likely felt it was nice to have an intelligent family film after having seen Cars 2. Another surprise nominee was Chico and Rita, directed by Fernando Trueba, Javier Mariscal, and Tono Arredondo. The first Spanish film to be nominated for Best Animated Feature, this notably adult film told the story of a piano player who falls in love with a singer. Set in Havana, the movie was praised for its sophisticated storytelling, adult content, and memorable jazz soundtrack, which was considered so pivotal to the enjoyment of the movie that it was packaged with the Blu-ray when the movie was released on physical media. One powerhouse that was not ignored this year was DreamWorks, whose Kung Fu Panda 2 was nominated. Directed by Jennifer Young Nelson, Kung Fu Panda 2 was very much critically acclaimed and hailed as one of DreamWorks' best films ever made. The sequel was praised for being more mature, surprisingly moving, and containing some of the best action scenes directed in the year. Nelson also made Oscar history by being the first solo female director to be nominated in this category, and even a softer than expected box office wasn't enough to deny Poe another chance at Oscar glory. Not done yet, DreamWorks managed to get 2 movies into the race, with Puss in Boots also getting a nomination. Directed by Chris Miller, Puss in Boots was a spin-off of the previous Oscar-winning Shrek franchise, though this movie focused more on action and adventure than humor. Gone were most of the pop culture references that made Shrek stand out, and the reframing of classic fairy tales was done in a more respectful tone than in the past. The end result was one of the rare spin-off movies that not only could stand on its own, but DreamWorks actually showed up Pixar by making a movie where a supporting character successfully transitioned into a lead role without taking away from the legacy of the franchise. The final nominee was Rango from Nickelodeon Movies. Yes, the same Nickelodeon that crashed the first party with an inexplicable nomination for Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius was back in the race. However, unlike that movie, Rango deserved to be here. Directed by Gore Verbinski, Rango was a shockingly mature western about a pet iguana who manages to convince a small town that he is a legendary sheriff who took out his enemies with only one bullet. Despite being produced by the kid-friendly Nickelodeon brand, the movie was violent, mature, featured characters who cursed, smoked, and drank, and the movie was overall very well received by teens and adults. And the scary thought that a Nickelodeon movie could actually win an Oscar was not such a crazy idea now. The race, once again, was on. The ceremony opened with Billy Crystal doing the usual jokes he was known for. This included his tradition of inserting himself into movies that received nominations, as well as his song and dance opening number. Then it was time for the show to begin. Tom Hanks was the first presenter to give out the award for Best Cinematography, an award that went to Martin Scorsese's Hugo. Hanks also presented the award for Best Art Direction, which also went to Hugo. Hanks was sidelined for the award for Best Costume Design, though, as the Academy strolled out Jennifer Lopez and Cameron Diaz, two very pretty and sexy ladies wearing these beautiful dresses. The award would go to the artist, which for me was a strange win, but considering how well the artist would do that night, it wasn't too surprising. Our two sexy ladies stuck around to give out a second Oscar to Best Makeup, which went to the Iron Lady. Sandra Bullock, looking just as good as the previous presenters, was up next to give out the Oscar for Best Foreign Language Film, which went to Asghar Farhadi's excellent A Separation, a movie I cannot recommend enough, to the point I would suggest taking a moment to pause this video and add it to the queue of whatever streaming service you can currently stream it from. Christian Bale, the year's previous Best Supporting Actor winner for The Fighter, then came on stage to present the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress, which went to Octavia Spencer in The Help. And I want to take a moment to say I'm very happy Octavia Spencer has an Oscar. I met her once, and she was an absolutely delightful person, and it's great to see when nice people receive awards like this. Then it was time for Bradley Cooper and Tina Fey to give out the Oscar for Best Film Editing, which deservedly went to The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, a movie I am still waiting for a proper sequel to. But I digress. Cooper and Fey stuck around to give out the Oscar for Best Sound Editing, which went to Hugo. They then stuck around for triple presenting duties, handing Hugo another Oscar for Best Sound Mixing. Gwyneth Paltrow and Robert Downey Jr. then stepped on stage doing a skit of Robert documenting his life in preparation for presenting the Oscar for Best Documentary, which went to Undefeated in a surprise upset. Honestly, while the documentary category tends to be unpredictable, it really seemed like either Paradise Lost 3, Purgatory, or Pina would be the big winners, but this documentary about a football coach who deals with inner-city kids was a more than worthy winner. Finally, it was time for Chris Rock to present the Oscar for Best Animated Feature. And I have to say, the fact that the show waited this long to present the award was actually quite symbolic, as the typical presentation of the awards is to start with one major award like Best Supporting Actor, get through the smaller awards, and then save the bigger categories for later. The category showing up this late in the show, instead of earlier, showed that the Academy was putting more weight on the importance of this award, which should not be overlooked. Now, Chris Rock's presentation did receive some controversy at the time because he decided to make this joke.
Now, I hate when people go on TV and tell you how hard it is to do animations. Like, oh, Jay, it's such hard work. It's so hard doing animation, getting into character. No. UPS is hard work, okay? Stripping wood is hard work. I've done some animation, and here's how easy it is. It's the easiest job in the world. I go in a booth, and I go, what's the line? And the guy goes, it's time to go to the store. And then I go, it's time to go to the store. And you like that? Oh, we can move on? Okay. And then I go, well, what's the next line? He goes, oh, it's getting dark outside. It's getting dark outside. And then they give me $1 million.
Now, I'm not gonna lie. On its own, that was a funny joke. But it's understandable how it would rub voice actors the wrong way. First of all, voice actors rarely make the kind of money Chris Rock makes, so that was clearly a sticking point. But there are also voice actors who spend years in the field of animation, crafting their skills to become the best actor in an industry that is competitive as hell. Let's be clear, Chris Rock wasn't getting paid $1 million by DreamWorks to be a good voice actor. He was getting paid $1 million because they wanted to advertise Chris Rock was in their movies. Still, I have to stress, as a joke, it was really funny. So while I don't think this was as insulting as that other event that happened, that we are building up way too much at this point, this was probably the start of where animators were watching the Oscars and thinking, How seriously is the Academy taking us if this is how they are going to present the award? While we have discussed presentations in the past that borderline on satire, this was probably the first time animators looked at that presentation and felt the Academy wasn't taking what they did seriously despite the award. But it was time to award a winner, and Rock did so.
All right, and the Oscar goes to Rango, Gore Verbinski.
And with that, Nickelodeon movies could claim to have won an Academy Award. No one would have ever thought a Nickelodeon movie would have taken home the gold, and in hindsight, it's still crazy to think this happened. What were the reasons Rango beat the other films, though? Here are the 8 most likely reasons. Number 1, DreamWorks split the vote. In a year where DreamWorks would have likely benefited from Pixar not being in the race, they managed to get 2 of their movies nominated. This meant that voters who wanted to award DreamWorks after several years had 2 choices, and neither one was especially stronger than the other, and both had their own unique strengths. This led to a second problem for DreamWorks, though. Number 2, one of those was a Shrek spinoff. While critics and audiences may have loved Puss in Boots, the movie was still seen as a spinoff of Shrek. Granted, it was more of an action-adventure movie that had left the Green Ogre studio riffing behind, but it was still seen as a semi-sequel. And while Toy Story 3 may have been given the gold the previous year, that movie was unquestionably a strong sequel, whereas Puss in Boots was a fun spin-off, but not much deeper than that. Number 3, The Adventures of Tintin wasn't nominated. Alright, let's make this perfectly clear. If The Adventures of Tintin had been nominated for Best Animated Feature, it would have won. Hands down, no competition. Yes, I know, that's a crazy thing to say for a movie that wasn't even nominated. But remember that at this point in time, animators were still picking the nominees. As mentioned earlier, and in previous videos, animators had major issues with motion capture technology, which is why the movie wasn't nominated. But if they had gone ahead and given a nomination, then the Academy as a whole would have been voting on this category. And there is absolutely no way the Academy would have given up the opportunity to give Steven Spielberg a 3rd Academy Award. Like, that would have been the biggest no-brainer in the world. The category was still seen as mostly a throwaway category at this point, so to use it as a chance to give Hollywood's golden boy another gold statue and to, in their eyes, legitimize the award would have been too much to pass up. Alas, the animators passed it up for more underground fare, so history was changed. Number 4, Chico and Rita and A Cat in Paris were underseen. While it was great for the Academy to shine a light on 2 movies that were largely unseen by audiences, those movies were also not seen by many Academy members. Chico and Rita was an adult movie in Spanish that you couldn't watch with the family at home, and at a scant 65 minutes, A Cat in Paris was so short many theaters didn't even carry it. So their nominations were the reward. Because when it came to the race this year, popularity was going to play a big role in the winner, leading us to number 5, Johnny Depp was in Rango. While Johnny Depp is a more controversial figure after his messy divorce from actress Amber Heard, at the time of Rango coming out, Depp was one of the Academy's golden children. He had received 3 Best Actor nominations in the previous 10 years, for Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl, Finding Neverland, and Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street. So he was certainly loved by the Academy. Him starring in Rango gave the actors branch, the biggest in the Academy, a reason to throw their weight behind this film. This was also because of reason number 6, the acting of Rango. While I don't want to dismiss voice actors as people who don't act, because you absolutely are acting even if only your voice is being heard, Rango took things to another level. Rather than have the actors stand in a booth and read from a script, the actors acted out their parts on sets for the recording sessions, not only as a way to get into character, but as a way to ensure their actual movements could be referenced by the animators. Sure, none of this was seen in the actual movie itself, but it had to tickle actors' ego a little bit to watch these behind-the-scenes videos of Johnny Depp and his co-stars interacting with each other on these Western sets, with the director giving actual direction to them. It wasn't just this extra step to voice acting that caught voice actors' attention, though. They also took notice of the fact that number 7, Rango, was surprisingly mature and adult. While it is clear that many people are aware of Rango and have seen it, many people forget that it was released under the Nickelodeon Movies banner, a banner that had largely been used for children's fare such as the Rugrats movie, Harriet the Spy, the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, and Good Burger. While these movies are fun, they are goofy and geared for younger audiences, whereas Rango was edgy, dark, and thoughtful. The characters cursed, smoked, and fought each other with guns like in the old Western movies. Some even questioned if the PG rating was too light, and thought a PG-13 would have been more appropriate. Yes, Chico and Rita was the more mature of the five overall, and would have received an R rating had it been submitted. But in terms of movies voters were taking their kids to, Rango stood out as more accessible compared to the DreamWorks movies that were nominated. Ignoring whether this was child-friendly or not, Rango was mature enough to feel like an actual family movie, one that could be enjoyed by both young kids as well as adults in the way other family movies like E.T. and Flight of the Navigator were. So it made sense that whether the voters were picking for themselves or asking their kids, Rango was going to have a boost. That said, there was one more reason why Rango pulled ahead. Number 8, Gore Verbinski was having a moment. One thing that may not be spoken of very often is that Gore Verbinski directed Rango. Now, if his name sounds familiar, there is a reason for that. He started his feature film career directing Mouse Hunt for the, at the time, newly formed DreamWorks, a family film that got mixed reviews but was a surprise hit for the new studio. He then went on to direct Hollywood heartthrobs Brad Pitt and Julia Roberts in The Mexican, another movie that was critically mixed but was a huge hit at the box office. He then had a massive hit with The Ring, which grossed more than 4 times its budget and has become a favorite for Halloween watch parties. However, it was the last few years where Verbinski broke out into his own, when he directed the original Pirates of the Caribbean trilogy, which were all huge hits at the box office and received multiple Oscar nominations. In the midst of those films, he also directed The Weatherman with Nicolas Cage, a movie that was critically acclaimed, though criminally underseen. Verbinski was giving off vibes of being the new It director. So when it came time for Academy voters to check their ballot, it was easy for many of them to vote for the director who was effortlessly switching between box office breaking blockbusters and intimate independent dramas. Much like how it made sense for the Academy to give George Miller an Oscar for Happy Feet, it just made sense to give Gore Verbinski an Oscar for Rango, especially without Steven Spielberg in the race. And with that, the Best Animated Feature category had its most exciting race in years. And it was exciting to not truly know where the winds would blow. But the following year was going to resemble awards races of the past, as Pixar was once again in the race. But so too was a strange black and white film from a Hollywood auteur who had never won an Oscar. Who would win? I'll see you next time when we find out.
Hey, you made it to the end. Thank you so much for making it to the end. Just a few more things. First of all, the names that you see on the screen, these are our Patreon and YouTube member supporters. And I thank each and every one of them. Their support helps me make exclusive videos for Patreon and YouTube members, as well as keep the channel running. And of course, is just of huge kindness to me. Also, don't forget to check out the iCritic-led podcast on Spotify, Apple, Google, Deezer, whatever podcasting service you listen to. It is there. We definitely want to see you there. And hey, there's also other videos that you can check out. So, check out these other channels, these other videos, especially that one. I think that's a really good one.